Hey, Steve Gamache here with a Chef Knives to Go quick look product video, and this time we're looking at the Mizuno Hontanren, and I'll probably butcher that, but anyway, blue number 2 Gyuto 210mm knife. This knife has a core steel of Aogami or blue paper number 2 reactive carbon steel. The heat treat rating is about 62 to 63 Rockwell on that core steel, and the construction is a softer iron cladding on either side of that core steel. You can see the core steel showing through on the grind. So this is not a stainless blade at all. It's entirely reactive, including the cladding. The weight is about 5.7 ounces, 162 grams. The blade length is undersized for a 210, so from tip to chin back here is about 200 millimeter, just slightly under 8 inches. And the overall length is about 13.6 inches. The spine thickness above the chin here is about 3.35 millimeters, and it maintains a fair amount of thickness and then thins out coming about the forward third of the blade, and then tapers off to a pretty nice distal taper given the kind of high grind on the knife. So you've got a fairly generous grind here in terms of length to give you a nice distal taper and a pretty thin tip. The height on this knife is 46 millimeter back here at the heel to the spine, and the handle type is just a basic, no frills, D-shaped, righty kind of biased handle. Hoe wood with buffalo horn ferrule, and the circumference of the handle is 2 7/8 inches right here. The blade does have a lacquer coating on it that encompasses the entire blade, although the edge is pretty darn sharp out of the box, so they did, I guess, sharpen it post-lacquer coating. So I give it about a 6 out of 10 on the edge. It's quite sharp and has some good tooth or bite to it. Looks like a nice bevel they put on it. The balance point on this knife is a very light handle, so the balance point is almost right on the money for a pinch grip for me. It's pretty darn close to a pinch grip. And that makes the blade has some weight to it and some mass to it, given the 5.7 ounces of the knife and how short it is, but it's a little bit tall. But it balances right about on my pinch grip, but yet it still has a little bit of mass to it, so it feels like you've got some knife in your hand for a little extra chopping power. Let's take a look at some close-ups of the knife characteristics or features. So on the left side of the blade, you've got some embossed kanji and stamping on it, so it's stamped in or embossed in. This knife has a beautifully done kind of a kasumi finish on the blade road, and you can definitely see the core steel showing through there. And then kind of a satin finish to the face of each side of the blade. And some of this stuff here is just markings on the lacquer finish. You can take that lacquer finish off if you want pretty easily, or just leave it on and let it wear off naturally. This is what the profile of the blade looks like. It has a fair amount of belly towards the very tip of the knife, a bit of a flat spot at the rear, kind of actually fairly generous for such a short knife in terms of length. And there's your choil shot. So it gets quite thin at the edge. Got a really nice grind on this. Let's take a look at it on our sample board and see what it looks like. So when you put it on the board itself, you do flow into a small heel area. It's actually a fairly decent heel area considering the length of the knife, as I said, but it's not a super long heel. It's maybe about a third of the blade, if that. But you get a fair amount of belly towards the tip. So you can get pretty high on this. I'm getting way up here before I start digging that tip in, so it'll rock pretty high. So I'd say this profile is kind of biased towards rocking, especially towards the tip. The tip is nice and thin, so it should have high performance through soft ingredients, but very smooth. This is just butter smooth in terms of how it flows into that heel section of the knife. Fit and finish on the blade is very, very good, and you've got a really nice rounding back here, almost konosuke type rounding of the choil emoto or neck area, and the spine is really nicely done, nicely polished blade. It's just a really nice fit and finish. As I said, it's got a kind of a weight to it, even though it's not real heavy, but it's got a nice feel to it, as if you've really got something in your hand. So a beautifully done and crafted knife. See if I can get the name close this time. So there we have the Mizuno Hontanren blue number 2 Gyuto 210mm knife.